YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my overview review of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers TMNT crossover 2. So this, as I stated, is going to be kind of an overview review, and meaning I'm going to be talking about big picture stuff, like the broad strokes of what I liked about it. You know, I'll hone in on a couple specific things, but I just mean that I'm not going to be doing a review where I'm like, okay, issue 1, page 1, issue 5, last page. This is just going to kind of be broad strokes. If you want my more detailed thoughts on each individual issue, I obviously have all those reviews. I should try to make a playlist. I need to do more playlists for these type of things. I need to be better about that. Future me, get on that. I hate you. So, overall, I enjoyed this. I think that pretty much sums it up. I think we're good here, right? I'll see you guys later. I always do these fake out bits and they're not even funny. Why do I keep doing that? In general, these crossovers have surprised me. I've talked about before when covering these that I wasn't looking really that much forward to the first one. Not that I hated it or anything, but I'm very crossovered out when it comes to the Ranger world. You know, and comic crossovers aren't usually as exciting for me because my favorite thing about crossovers is getting to see actors and characters interact on screen. So I was only excited on it on the level of, okay, yeah, more comic content, which I love. But then it really surprised me how great the first one was. You know, the overall storyline of both of them isn't the most amazing thing you're ever gonna see. It's very simple, but I think that's what makes it work. But they blend together the characters in the world so well that it was just a joy to read. I'm like, man, I really loved that. So when they announced the second one, I was legit stoked, and it did not disappoint. You know, I liked it, I think, even more than the first one, because I think it took everything that made the first one work and doubled it, and it didn't lose itself. And I think that's what is key in the simplicity. I talked about in every week's review how the overall story is pretty by the numbers simple. It's as simple as you could get, a lot of cliche twists and stuff like that. But I think that works in its favor because oftentimes with these crossovers you can get too complicated trying to weave things together and make it too interesting, trying to grab attention, and it makes it too complicated and too messy. Or you're like a Toku crossover where it's just garbage run through a shredder and I don't even want to ever look at that again. And I hate those movies because the plots are so overly complicated and they leave you with so many questions and frustrations. And I think the elegance in this was the simplicity of the core story, and it allowed the elements of it to shine. And by that I mean the character interactions and the mythologies blending. I think those are my two favorite things about it. I mean, the character interactions have been great for both of them. You have some nice funny little moments of dialogue between the characters. You have even some scenes in the comic where it's just the Turtles interacting with other Turtles characters that makes you feel like you're reading a Turtles comic. So there's some funny lines in there, funny interactions between the characters, funny stuff like the Rangers commenting on their mutant forms and I can't play the flute in this form and stuff like that. And also some really meaningful character moments where you'll match up characters that will, obviously you would match up like Donatello and Billy because they're the smart characters, and the leader characters, and sort of paralleling the Tommy, Jason, Leo, Raph dynamic. And so you have some fun interactions like that. One of my favorite character interactions and dynamics was Splinter mentoring the Mutant Rangers when it happened. So it was filled with all kinds of great character interactions, which the first one did so well, is it made these characters feel like they had great chemistry. And like I said, I have a harder time getting excited and connecting with comics when it comes to that sometimes. And both 1 and 2 did a great job of making me feel the chemistry between the characters, and it was actually so enjoyable just to see them interact and live in the same space, whether it was them sitting around having, drinks at the juice bar or them bantering in battle. That was one of the strengths. And because we had the first comic, it felt like these characters were allies that knew each other. I mean, they were, but you know what I mean. It felt more established, which I think made the interactions all the better in this one. And my other favorite thing about this overall was the blending together of the mythologies. I brought this up in almost every single review I did, so I apologize if that was repetitive, and now I'm bringing it up here again. But what was cool about the way that these blended together was, I've mentioned this, it felt like two characters crossing over, or two series of characters crossing over that were part of the same shared universe, and not two properties smashing together, like the Godzilla one or the Justice League one, where I think you know what I mean? It felt more like these were characters that inhabited the same shared universe. It felt more like the X-Men meeting the Avengers than it did the Avengers if they were to meet the Justice League, if that makes any sense. It didn't feel like two properties that should never have met are now meeting. It felt like the mythology seamlessly blended together, with the Dimension X Rangers, even the Turtles villains. It all felt like it fit together very well, and I really liked that. And I found it interesting. I'm the idea of the Dimension X having its own morphers was so cool. And that was awesome. And speaking of, I love all the crossover designs. I think, for the most part, they always make sense organically. I think in the first one, the first crossover, it was a little more organic. whereas here, there was definitely a little bit more pushing, like, let's do some cool fan service, but it never bothered me. I want to make that clear. And for the most part, I think they blended together all really nice. Like the Krang Megazord thing, it was fan servicey, but it made sense in the context of the story. Same thing with like the original Turtles powers and stuff like that, and they kind of had to force the explanation a little bit of like why you would have the Mutant Rangers, but it mostly worked, and it was really cool to see. I'm really curious to see what they do for a third one, because it felt like they did almost all the ideas you could possibly do for this, but I love the Dimension X suits. I brought up before that, you know, I wish that the helmets were a little bit more different, and there was some slight differentiation, kind of a similar problem the Omegas have, but still, I love the suits. Some of my favorite suits, because I like that they work as a crossover thing, but also they could very much stand on their own as Ranger suits. Megazord was rather basic, but I liked it for what it was. The concept of Krang just like sitting in the middle of the robot was very much in design with what Krang does, and it gave the Megazord a little bit more of an evil look, which was rather cool. I loved the Turtle Dragon Zord. I thought that was one of the better like hybrid designs. I liked the Shredder 2.0 design. And of course, the Mutant Rangers. That was so cool. Such a cool idea that in a way I'm surprised I didn't even think about that happening, both for this and the original one. And I love those. I want Lightning Collection figures for pretty much all the designs. But these, I think in particular, I think the Dimension X Rangers and the Mutant Rangers are tied, but I'm just imagining like the deluxe figure scale that we do for the Monsters of the Week with that detail for these would be so amazing to see. Those were so cool. And there's so many cool moments with those too. And I just really liked all the hybrid designs that came out of this. And it's interesting too with the mythologies meeting how we used a lot of Turtles mythology in this. Like the first one kept it really simple, you know, the very core elements of both series. But this one, you brought in a lot of stuff. When you brought in Krang, you even had Leatherhead in there. Baxter Stockman was in there. And it's funny because when you compare it to PR doesn't have as rich of a rogues gallery in terms of MMPR. Like there was a time we brought in a bunch of the Monsters of the Week, but in my mind, that's not the same as the characters we saw from Turtles, because it's kind of similar to seeing a bunch of Spider-Man villains or Batman villains or characters where they're actual characters and not henchmen. Like, but the problem is with MMPR, you're more limited, because PR in general has a large rogues gallery of villains, but like no one's going to give a shirt who Rancic is if he were to show up. That would make any sense here. So it just is interesting to compare that, like how much more of a rich mythology you have to delve into from Turtles compared to when you're just going for MMPR stuff. Like even when we delve into seasons 2 and 3, if we ever do for this, it's only really the Ranger stuff that would expand, like the possibility of crossover designs, and there's not really a whole lot of villains. I mean, I guess you got like Rito, that's about it. I mean, maybe Master Vile. But still, I thought that was interesting. That was one of my overall favorite things, like I said, was the blending together of the mythologies, which made it really interesting, and it made me interested to see more of this shared world, and it creates this interesting shared story where, like I said, at the end of this story, you have Rita being sealed away, like the end of the season 1 arcs, and then you're going into season 2. It's like this alternate reality where some of the events versions of the show are playing out, but with the Turtles there, which is just kind of cool and fun. And it's overall such an enjoyable story. Like, again, so many of the things are basic, like with Evil Casey and so many predictable little things, but it never bothered me that much. I was just kind of like, yeah, this is basic, but what it does is that it doesn't make it complicated so that you can enjoy what really matters, which is the characters and the story and the fun. And that, as long as it's enjoyable, that's what's great. And I think I would maybe like to see a more interesting story in the future, but I'm also okay with them keeping it simple, because it keeps it simple and enjoyable, and it doesn't ruin anything with like weird overcomplications. So maybe some more interesting stuff in the future, but I'm fine with it being simple if they can keep it of good quality. I do want to say, though, something I forgot to bring up in my final issue review. I'm really glad they didn't have Shredder turn on the Rangers and the Turtles in this story. Like, obviously, at the end, he's like, yeah, I'm still evil, wahaha, Zed, come join me. But it would have been even more predictable if, like, mid-battle at some point, he just lost it and, you know, attacked somebody. I was waiting for that to happen. They even bring it up in the final issue. They're like, what if he betrays us? Everybody betray me. I fed up with his world. But I'm glad it didn't happen. I think that there was too many cliches, like even in the last issue. Again, it didn't make me hate it at all, but like they're like, oh, mind control Casey. And I'm like, if Shredder betrays him, it would just be too many. And in general, in stories like that, I hate when that thing that you're waiting to happen, like the character betraying them, you think's going to betray them, and then it happens. So I'm glad that they held off on that. And it was kind of cool to actually see him as an ally and getting to see him fight with the Turtles, Rangers, and all that. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this series. Like I said, if you want more detailed thoughts on sort of the more like individual story points, I have all 5 issues reviewed. But if you're a PR and a Turtles fan, I highly recommend you check out both series. You know, right now the trade paperback is available for the first one, so you can pick that up. Obviously, these 5 issues are out. You can get them digitally and physically, or maybe wait for the the trade paperback, like with the first one, if you haven't read it yet. But if you're a fan, I can definitely recommend them. They're very good comic stories, very enjoyable, some of the best crossovers we've gotten for the comics. But that is it for my review. Let me know what you guys thought of the series if you read it. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.